June is somehow over. Honestly, I feel like this month just started. How is time moving so fast? But anyway, I have some books, movies, TV show, and music to share with you guys. Okay, let's do it. I have been reading A Little Life for almost a year now, and I know that's pathetic, but hear me out. I started reading a library copy of this book, but eventually had to return it, so I switched to an online version. But I was also reading a number of other books physically, and usually when I had the option to read a physical book or an ebook, I went for the physical. So I would find myself reading A Little Life sporadically, like when I was waiting to be picked up for my piano lessons once a week, when we could still go outside and all of that. Eventually, I got really tired of reading like 3 pages every week, so I decided to start from the beginning and give it a real go. Which brings us to now. I'm back at the beginning, but from the half of it I already read, man, this thing is depressing. I don't want to talk more about it right now, because I want to get to the end and be able to form actual coherent thoughts about it, so hopefully you can hear about that in my That's a Wrap for July. The rest of this month I read When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon and The Way Way Back by Alan Stratton, and I've started Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. I'm not going to talk about them here because I'm making an entire video about them, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to preface this next part by saying that J.K. Rowling is trash, and I in no way share her dumbass views. As far as I'm concerned, Twitter should ban her, and the Harry Potter series magically penned itself into existence. Or like Daniel Radcliffe wrote it or something. Having said that, I finished up the rest of the Potter movies this month. Order of the Phoenix isn't my favorite by a long shot. One of the highlights of this book is Dumbledore's army, which is an ongoing thing throughout the majority of this story. However, in the movie, almost the entirety of the Dumbledore's army plotline is done in one montage, and I love the montage, don't get me wrong, but I always wished there was more. The end with Voldemort possessing Harry and Harry being able to fight him off because of all the love in his life always hits me in the heart. And also this. Yeah, 4 stars. Half-Blood Prince is one of my favorites of the series, even though the movie cuts out so many of Voldemort's memories, which is one of the reasons I love the book so much, but somehow this film still manages to work for me. It balances the romantic aspects with a darker tone really well, and to be honest, I think this is one of the funniest movies of the series. I mean,
she's only interested in you because she thinks you're the chosen one.
But I am the chosen one. Okay, sorry. I reckon she was starting to annoy you. She could never annoy me. Not to mention the pincers.
Harry!
Sir!
it's gold. 4.5 stars. Deathly Hallows Part 1 is good, people. Everyone always says it's the one you can skip, and honestly, you can't. The whole plot of this film is finding and destroying the very things that are keeping the big bad wolf alive. They find the first Horcrux and figure out how to destroy it in this one. They learn about the Deathly Hallows in this one. They dabble into Dumbledore's past in this one. It's important stuff, and it's a good movie, so don't skip it. 4 stars. Deathly Hallows Part 2 ripped my soul apart, and yes, that is a Horcrux joke. The prince's memories and Harry in the forest with the resurrection stone is emotionally exhausting to sit through. The last frame is cheesy, and I love it. I cry every time I watch it, although what more were you expecting? 4.5 stars. Then I watched Jurassic Park for the first time with my sister. This was such a fun experience. The first hour was really interesting, getting to see and learn about the world, and the second hour was a non-stop anxiety ride. I thought all the effects looked pretty good for a movie that came out in 1993. Overall, it was a fun time. I can definitely see why it's a classic. 4 stars. I wasn't planning on watching Mockingjay Part 1 this month, but I'd watched Jurassic Park with my sister, and she was also in the middle of rereading and rewatching The Hunger Games, so I ended up watching this one with her. Like with Deathly Hallows Part 1, I don't agree with people who say this movie is useless. Yes, it's not as action-heavy, but I think it explores some important stuff, like the mental repercussions of being a part of 2 Hunger Games, and the behind-the-scenes of organizing a revolution. There's huge weight put on rallying people together through propos and keeping the momentum going. It's strangely relevant to what's happening in the world today. Overall, I really like this one. Was it completely necessary for them to make this? No, but am I glad they did? Absolutely. I finally watched Kubo and the Two Strings this month, and I absolutely loved it. I don't know the most about animation, but I can tell when it's gorgeous, and it looks like lots of time, love, and care went into crafting each frame, and I definitely got that from this movie. It's a sweet story with even sweeter visuals, and I recommend it to everyone, regardless of your age. 4.5 stars. The Lost World wasn't as good as Jurassic Park for me. For one thing, the story in this one was a lot bigger. There were more characters and plot lines, and I feel like some of them got a bit muddied up in the execution. Whereas in the first movie, Alan had a solid character arc where he was trying to learn how to connect with children, Ian didn't really have that in this one. I think it could have been really great too had they done it, because there could be some comparisons drawn between how the Rexes will do anything to protect their young, and how Ian needed to step up as a father and protect his daughter. It could have had a message like parenting is universal or something like that. I don't know. It just didn't hit the same way as the original. 3 stars. Since I watched Mockingjay Part 1, I decided to watch the second one as well. Even though I've seen it a ton of times, it still hits the same. Finnick deserved better, I guess Prim did too, and man, that execution scene is still incredible. 3.5 stars. I finally watched The Matrix for the first time. It's so funny that one film could spark this entire cultural debate and make people still refer to weird stuff they see as a glitch in the Matrix. There was some stuff that I didn't fully understand, but I was able to brush it off because the action in this film is awesome. That bullet dodging scene? Iconic. 3.5 stars. I already knew the big twist going into Shutter Island, but throughout the movie I kept doubting whether what I'd heard about it was actually the full truth, and I think that just goes to show how trippy this movie is. I just wish I hadn't been spoiled for this film, because I think the experience of going into it knowing nothing would have been fantastic. Nonetheless, that flashback scene after the plot twist was haunting to say the least, and is definitely the best scene in the movie. There was some loose ends, some stuff that wasn't fully explained, but overall, it's a bad trip and a good ride. 4 stars. This just in, Sierra Burgess is indeed a loser. Continuing on with my foray into bad movies with my friend, this one is definitely the least bad of the movies we've seen so far. It was actually nice to look at. It seemed like there was some thought put into it and some effort into making it have this 80s aesthetic, which I didn't really get why they went for that specifically, but I'm not complaining. It's just a shame that the story is terrible. Sierra Burgess is a trash human. She catfishes someone, offends the entire deaf community, publicly humiliates one of her best friends, and, oh yeah, she assaults someone. Overall, this would have been way better if she and Veronica fell for each other, but then again, she's trash, and my baby Veronica deserves a lot better. 2.5 stars. My first 2020 release was The King of Staten Island. I actually enjoyed this more than I thought I would. I liked this style that it had to it. There were a bunch of longer scenes, especially in the beginning, where characters were just talking or hanging out that were nice, because it sort of felt like I was just watching people live their lives. However, at times, I think the scenes were just a tad too long. I feel like if the dialogue had been compressed a bit and a good 1 or 2 minutes could have been shaved off a few sequences, then there would have been a better flow between those scenes. The second half of the movie was a lot better about this. Overall, it was a sweet watch that I would definitely recommend. 3.5 stars. Jurassic Park 3 was absolutely the worst one. At this point, why are people still going to this freaking island? Just leave the poor dino boys alone, alright? Also, seeing as I've watched all 3 of these movies really close together, I'm a bit done with the franchise for now. I mean, how many different ways can you watch dinos wreak havoc without it getting repetitive? 2.5 stars. Gravity was an absolute beauty to look at and to listen to, and I just wish I'd caught this in theaters when it first came out. The story to me was kind of a classic space survival story. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite of the space movies I've seen, so 3.5 stars. And then I finally watched Inception for the first time. I watched this with my sister so that we could talk our way through it and make sure we both understood what was happening. Basically, it took us like 7 hours to watch a 2.5-hour movie because of all the things we had to do in between scenes and all the mental gymnastics we went through to try and make things make sense. I mean, what else can I say about it? Everyone in this is fantastic. The story is very what the F, and all of these handsome men were dressed very dapper-like in suits, so what more could I ask for? 5 out of 5 stars, but I was honestly thinking of taking a star off because Christopher Nolan really named the main character Dom Cobb. I watched my first Studio Ghibli film ever, My Neighbor Totoro, and can I just say, wow. I already knew how gorgeous Studio Ghibli animation was, but seeing it with my own eyes was a completely different experience. Watching this movie felt like I was being transported to another dimension, where nothing else mattered except these adorable kids, the adorable Totoro, and the allure of the Japanese countryside. I can't wait to watch more Studio Ghibli. 4.5 stars. I ended off the month with Bong Joon-ho's filmography. This month I got to Barking Dogs Never Bite, Memories of Murder, and The Host. I won't talk too much about them now because I'm working on a whole separate video about them, so stay tuned for that. Hollywood was right up my alley because I love period pieces and old Hollywood. They just give me such a great feeling. Also, this series takes place in the early 50s, I'm assuming, and the 50s is one of my favorite decades in terms of fashion and music and dancing, so I was really excited for this. I think the show got off to a bit of a rocky start, but it found its footing around episode 3-ish. For the most part, I really enjoyed it. It's a sort of reimagining of what Hollywood could and should have been like in terms of embracing different sexualities and ethnicities. One of my bigger complaints with the series is how it handled big reveals with characters. It felt like the conversation would be progressing normally, and then it would shift quickly to this reveal, and then it wouldn't linger long enough on it. It made these moments feel a bit forced, and I just think they could have improved it a lot if they'd slowed down the pacing of these scenes to really let the characters and the audience sit with what had just been said. That way the audience would have had more time to be able to empathize before moving on to the next scene. Other than that, though, I thought it was an enjoyable series. The last episode had me getting pretty emotional, and I would definitely like to see a season 2. 3.5 stars. I started watching The Eddie because Damien Chazelle, jazz, and French, and I think that's all I really need to say. I've only seen one episode so far, but I'm already really enjoying it. It feels very gritty. There are lots of handheld shots, and also lots of very long shots that, again, like The King of Staten Island, made me feel like I was just watching people living their normal lives. It's an aesthetic that I think works well for this story, or at least what I've seen of it so far. I just wish there was more French being spoken, since I was drawn to it in the first place so that I could practice my French listening comprehension. I'm always looking for more media in French and Spanish to continue my learning. But funny thing, as soon as the main character, played by Andre Holland, started speaking in French, I recognized him as an American because I could actually understand his French without reading the French subtitles. But then, as soon as Tahar Rahim started speaking, I was like, oh yeah, he's a native French speaker. Because native French speakers are so hard to understand in movies and TV, because they talk so fast, and their accents are actually French, so they barely open their mouths, and they slur all their words together. Having said all that, I love it. I love French. Tangent aside, I'm excited to keep watching. Lastly, I started watching Love Alarm. Again, I won't talk too much about this because this is a whole separate video. Also, I wouldn't be able to talk about it even if I wanted to, since I only watched like half of the first episode so far, but I'm excited to get more into it in July. I really started getting into BTS this year because everyone and their mothers are obsessed with them, including every friend I have. Eventually, I got tired of not knowing what the hell they were all talking about, so I decided to properly check them out, and now I live in this hole. I've mentioned this because I've been listening to Stay Gold a lot this month. It's such a cute, beautiful song that makes me feel all warm inside every time I listen to it, and the lyrics are adorable. I smiled so hard watching the music video that my face was hurting, but how could you not smile watching this? It's freaking adorable. I'm excited to listen to the other original Japanese songs that are going to be on the album. 4 stars to Stay Gold, can't wait for the full album. While we're on the topic of BTS, I've been listening to Auguste's D2 a lot this month. I love Yoongi's flow, okay? He's somehow both soothing to listen to, but he also makes me want to fight anyone I see, and that's a talent. My favorites are Daechwita, What Do You Think, Burn It, and Set Me Free, but honestly, this whole thing is fantastic. Also, Daechwita Yoongi does things to me, especially here. I mean, just look at him. Okay, sorry. I just wish it was longer, I guess, but I'll settle for playing it on repeat more times that can be considered healthy. 4.5 stars. Once again, all the music I spoke about will be in the description below if you want to check it out. And there you have it. That was my month in books, movies, TV, and music. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Let me know what some of the stuff you loved this month, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, I'm on platforms, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and Letterboxd, those links will be in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.